Hey guys, it's Elise and welcome back to My Cupcake Addiction. Today we're going to combine two of my all-time favourite things, donuts and cake, and we're going to make this amazing over-the-top donut drip cake. To make your donut cake, of course you're going to need cake. So I've got a double batch of my favourite chocolate cake recipe. I'm going to leave it down below, and I've baked that in 3 8-inch tins, and each layer is about an inch and a half high. For my vanilla cake, I actually used a packet cake recipe today. I did this because my vanilla sponge recipe is a little too light and fluffy. This is going to be a pretty decent cake, so I want to make sure it can hold up under the weight of all that chocolate cake. I added a little bit of strawberry extract and pink food colouring to my vanilla layers so that I've got strawberry frosting kind of pink coloured cake layers to interchange with my brown. I've got a cake board and a turntable. I'm using a triple batch of my perfectly pipeable buttercream frosting. I'll link to the recipe down below. I took all 3 batches together, then divided them in half and tinted half pink and left the other half white. But you can change this colour scheme up to suit the occasion you're making it for. I've got some dark chocolate and some cream. I've got some quite thin chocolate blocks. I'm just using milk chocolate, but again, choose your favourite. I'm also using some melted pink candy melts, or you can tint your own white chocolate. A couple of pre-made donuts, make your own, get them store-bought, and a ton of sprinkles. I've got a batch of my vanilla sugar cookie dough. I'm going to leave all of your dough recipes, cake recipes, and ganache quantities in the description box below, so make sure you check that out if you're going to recreate this cake. As far as tools go, we've got an offset spatula, a serrated edge knife, and a cake leveler, some zip seal bags, and a tray lined with a bit of parchment. You're also going to need a rolling pin and just a little bit of additional flour to roll your cookies out with. Let's get started with our outrageous donut cake. The first thing we're going to do is make our donut cookies because they need to cook and then they need to cool, and we've got to decorate them. You can also do this bit the day before. So you notice my cookie dough, it's always wrapped in plastic wrap unless I'm actually physically using it so it doesn't dry out. It's also always refrigerated because if your cookie dough isn't cool when it goes in the oven, your cookies are going to spread and they're not going to look like donuts anymore. So sprinkle down a generous amount of flour, and you want this to be quite thick. We don't want too thin of a sugar cookie here because it's got to hold its own weight. I'm going to take a little bit of plastic wrap and just lay it over my cookie dough. And this is going to give us kind of like the edge of the donut, although kind of rounded side edge of the donut. I used a bowl because I didn't have a circle cookie cutter this large. I'm going to place it onto my cookie dough and then I'm going to press down with all of my muscles. Lifting up. Now you can see by using that plastic wrap, what we've got is a really, really nice rounded edge, just like a donut. For my center hole, I'm going to use the back edge of my cookie cutter, not the sharp edge, because again, I kind of want it to be a little bit more rounded. I'm just going to slide my offset spatula just underneath the cookie, making sure he's not stuck to the bench at all. And then carefully lifting. That's going to go over here onto my piece of parchment. And then I'm going to take my popsicle sticks right into the bottom section. This is going to be what sort of holds it onto the cake. You can actually cook the popsicle sticks in the oven. Keep going until you've used all of your cookie dough. It doesn't matter how many donuts you have here. I think more is always better, but I did a really large one, a medium-sized one, and then I've got a smaller one, and I'm going to use my scraps to make some really small ones, so don't leave any cookie dough unused. If these ones are still chilled and feel cold to touch from the rolling process, you can put them straight in the oven. If you're not sure if they feel a little warm, put them in the fridge for 10 minutes first so they go in nice and cold. These ones are going to go into a moderate oven for 10 to 15 minutes, and I'll know they're done when they just slightly start to brown around the outside edges. Once your cookies are cooked, you want to let them sit on the baking tray for about 5 to 10 minutes before transferring them to a cooling rack where they can completely cool. We're going to level our cake, so I've just invested in a $13 cake leveler. Normally I'd use a serrated knife, but this does give me a more even result. And I don't want to take too much height off my cakes, so I'm really only taking as little as possible to keep them all about the same height. Check out the color of this gorgeous pink cake underneath. It's always a little bit more muted on the outside, but check that out. It's absolutely stunning. If you guys are following my Facebook Lives, you would have seen me turn this into like a leftover cake parfait. No waste. This is going to be my mum's birthday cake, so I have to make it today, but I actually don't get to eat it today, and I'm not going to go the day without cake. Once you've got the top leveled off, you can turn it upside down, take your serrated knife now, and then just trim the smallest amount off the bottom. This is really only pertinent for the pink cakes because I don't want to see any of that brown with the lovely white frosting in between the layers. You want to repeat that with all of your pink layers and all of your brown chocolate layers so that you've got 6 lovely, similar sized, trimmed, ready to go cake layers. Now, if we go word association, there are very few words that pair quite as beautifully with donuts than sprinkles. I mean, apart from coffee. Coffee also pairs well. So I'm going to make like a Funfetti sprinkle mix frosting. Straight out vanilla frosting and then quite a few of my sort of long Funfetti sprinkles, and I'm just going to stir those through. This way the sprinkles on my donut cake are on the inside. Super cute, Funfetti frosting. All right, so now you want to take your cake board and we're going to stack our cake layers. Doesn't matter if you want to start with pink or brown. I'm going to go with brown, and you need a little bit of frosting down on that board just to stick it in place. Now with my frosting between the layers, I'm going to do a really thin coat, especially on these chocolate cakes, just to catch any chocolate crumbs, because I want those Funfetti sprinkles to be able to sort of shine through the frosting. Once you've got a nice thin coat, then you can come and add in like a bit more frosting, and it'll be nice and white. So as you cut it, you'll get a really nice kind of a white sprinkly line in between each layer. Whenever you do this, you want to make sure that your frosting comes out over the outside of the layers. So push it right out so it's just slightly overlapping with the edge of your cake. And that way, when we go to smooth it off, we won't have any gaps or lumps on the inside of our cake that are frosting free. One of our pink layers. I love the addition of strawberry into this cake because for me, strawberry donuts, I mean, chocolate donuts are good, but strawberry donuts are where it's at when I go to the donut store. Once your cake's looking stacked, I always like to trim the outside edges of my cake, provided I'm working with a fairly solid cake. So I'm just going to use my serrated edge knife and I'm just going to trim down so that I've got a completely even cake all the way down, and I expose all that gorgeous color underneath. Kind of looks a bit like a Neapolitan cake at the moment. I made a massive mess, so I had to tidy up, but my cake is ready for its crumb coat. You just want to add just a very, very thin bit of frosting all the way around the outside edges. It's going to catch all the crumbs from those freshly cut sides of the cake, just kind of trap them all in place and give us a really nice firm base to put our next coat of frosting over. So don't be too fussy with your crumb coat. Once you're happy that you've got a decent sort of a layer of frosting and all of your crumbs are trapped below, we're going to pop it off into the fridge for 20 minutes. While that goes in the fridge, we're going to make our ganache. So you want to take your chocolate and also your whipping cream or thickened cream, and I'm going to pour my cream over the top. I want this to be a relatively thick ganache, but I also don't want it to be hot, so I'm going to make it now and then just let it sit at room temperature for at least 20 minutes before I even attempt to put it on the cake. You want to microwave that one for 30-second intervals, stirring in between until it's completely smooth. So with your ganache made, and it should have no lumps. For a drip cake, you really don't want any lumps. I always like to cover mine with a bit of plastic wrap, but you want to make sure that when you cover that, the plastic wrap's like almost, well, actually touching the ganache. That's just going to stop it from forming a crust, so we don't get any little chunks and lumps in our perfectly smooth drip. Off to the side. Now your donut cookies should be cooked and kind of looking a little bit like popsicles. It's time to decorate. So I've melted my pink candy melts and also my dark candy melts or dark chocolate, and I'm just going to put them into a Ziploc bag and snip off a very fine tip. Starting with the pink one, I'm going to trace an outline all the way around the outside, but leaving some of those little peaks of brown cookie poking through. And then once your outline's in place, you want to just line around the center hole and then fill it in with all those candy melts. On the cooling rack, you want to give it a couple of good taps on the bench so that your candy melt or your chocolate distributes and kind of smooths out. And then I use some larger sprinkles just to sprinkle gently on top of my pink donut. For the next one, I opted for dark chocolate, and again, the same technique, but for this one, I opted for hundreds and thousands, our small sprinkles, all over the one side of the donut, because when I order donuts, I kind of like to get all my sprinkles in one bite. Decorate all of your little donuts, and then use that same technique to decorate your store-bought or your fresh cinnamon donuts. That's going to give us a mixture of sort of small, large, medium, real, and cookie donuts, so we can really pile those donuts high on top of this cake. Now, so far, everything on this cake's looking pretty round. From the round cake itself to all of our donut shapes, those real donuts, it's round, round, round. So I want to add some kind of angles into it and also add as much height as I possibly can. You guys can create your own chocolate shards, but I'm just going to use a regular milk chocolate block. I've picked quite a thin one. Now, I want to make sure here that this is not cold or it's going to crack when I try to cut it. So using a sharp knife, I'm going to cut it on an angle all the way across, and you'll see that I'm kind of just almost creating or carving a bit of a line. Because it's not refrigerated, it will melt a little bit quicker, so you do have to be a little bit more careful. And then you should just be able to carve straight down. Perfect. You'll notice that I'm doing all of my touching on this side. That's because I want the other side to be my good side, and I don't want to be leaving fingerprints all over it. Placing my pink candy melts or your pink chocolate into a snap seal bag. Push it all the way down to one end of the bag and then snip off a nice sort of a fine corner. Take your Ziploc bag with your pink candy melts now, and we're just going to create like a drizzle effect or a drip effect. So I'm going to come around the top and making sure that I overlap the sides a little bit, create a very strategic, almost cartoon-like looking drip. I'm not so concerned about the back because the back of the cake is the back of the cake, but I do want the front to look really, really cute and almost cartoonish. Filling in with that zip seal bag. And then we're going to take some sprinkles, and don't go too crazy on the sprinkles. I like just like, all right, you can go a little crazy on the sprinkles. Perfect, let that completely set. If you make those on a tray, you can actually put them off into the fridge. You want those shards to be super nice and refrigerated set before we try to put them in the cake. So not cold when we start decorating them, but definitely set when we stab them in. So your cake should have its nice little crumb coat set, and it should be pretty nice and firm to touch. So we've got our shards chilling out, all of our donuts are done. Now I'm gonna put on my final coat of frosting, or my good coat of frosting. So you can apply a really generous amount of frosting all over the cake. Always make more frosting than you think you're going to need. Once all of your frosting's on, and it should be a nice thick coat, I'm gonna use this. This is actually like a cake scraper that I bought at a decorating class one day, but a metal ruler will do virtually the same thing. So I always like to start with the top so that I can make sure my cake is nice and level all the way over, and then scrape off any excess frosting and smooth out the sides of your cake. Once you're happy that all of your sides are smooth, with a clean scraper again, you just want to come and just kind of drag back, almost like a cement leveler, so that you've got nice sharp edges. Something like that. I'm just going to tidy up the base of my board because I don't want it to be too messy. But you want to work quite quickly here because we need to act on our sprinkling before that buttercream starts to crust. Now when it comes to the sprinkles around this cake, you may not want to place them quite as precisely as I am, but I'm actually going to use tweezers and evenly space out my long sprinkles. And then I also found just some sort of smaller and larger round sprinkles to break it up. I put quite a few sprinkles around the very, very bottom section of the cake, but I wanted it to look like there was a ton at the bottom and then they kind of got thinner as they went up. So it didn't look messy. It kind of looked, I'm going to say, strategically placed. I don't often use tweezers in my decorating, but today I think the effect's worth it. Once your sprinkles are all done, your cake goes back into the fridge for 20 minutes to allow that buttercream coat to set and for it to get nice and cool before we apply our drip. Coming back from the fridge and our cake's looking amazing. I actually kind of like how it looks against my purple top. It's quite a nice color combination. So I've got my ganache and I want to show you guys just a little tip for your ganache. I've made quite a few drip cakes with varying results, and the consistency of the ganache for the drip is everything. You get the wrong consistency, it's either going to slide down the cake and pull at the bottom, or it's going to sit at the top and not go down far enough. So I always like to test it out. And I mean, you can see that I sat it for 20 minutes, then I microwaved it for 10 seconds just to bring it back a little bit runnier. But if you want to test it, take a teaspoonful of ganache. I'm putting mine on my scraper, but you could just use something like a cake board. And then you want to tilt it basically straight. That's going to tell you how quickly, how far, and how fast your ganache is going to travel. Mine's going to go a little slower because I know that my cake's cold, but for me, that's pretty cool. It hasn't gone straight off the end just yet. It's traveling at a slow enough speed that I know I'm going to get some nice lengths and sizes of drip without having everything just kind of look like stripes down the side of the cake, pooling messily at the bottom in my sprinkles. I'm going to work quite quickly here because I don't want my ganache to start to set, and I'm only going to add just over half of it to begin with. You can always add more, but you can't take it away. On to the top of the cake. All right, so just over half I've added. Now you can see that you can kind of control it at this point. If it starts to go too much on one side, just use the spoon to bring it back. And then I'm going to use that spatula. I'm going to very gently, cake turntables are fantastic here, turn that around, and I'm just evenly pushing it out to the edges. And then I'm going to just sort of encourage it to go over the sides at little intervals all the way around. Try not to make these too even. And our drip is looking amazing. Now, I had 2 teeny tiny little sugar cookies. I told you to use all of your cookie dough, and that does not matter how small they get. So I'm actually going to put these guys on the front of my cake. I found a little gap and I think they're going to look adorable. So I'm going to use just a little of my ganache because my buttercream's already frosted, and I'm just going to put just a little on the back of each. Don't put too much because you really don't want it like poking out the sides onto that pink frosting. We don't want to see the brown ganache anywhere but on top. And then on goes my teeny tiny one. That's also a really good trick if you've got any little bits of frosting that you're not particularly happy with, or if any of your drips have gone rogue, just cover them up. This is always the fun part. So you want to start just piling up all of your donuts and candy shards. Now, I always start with the biggest piece, the biggest and the heaviest. Whenever you've got a heavy piece, make sure it's not too close to the back of the cake or it will start to pull the cake downwards. Then in goes my next little donut cookie. In the very back here, I'm going to put some of my chocolate shards that are all really nice and chilled. With my chocolate shards, I like to make just a little kind of a knife imprint just where I want them to go because I never want to put too much pressure on, especially those fine points of chocolate. And in it goes off on a bit of an angle. And then you just want to keep piling on all of your little donuts, your decorated donuts, donut cookies and shards. And I actually thought it was kind of cute just to stack the little donuts. So I just grabbed a skewer and just pushed it through so that they're all in kind of a stack. But do make sure that you bring that skewer out of the cake before or during the eating process, or let the guests know that it's in there so that no one accidentally eats it. I've gone with my couple of big shards at the back, and your smaller cookies will just stand up in that ganache by themselves. The last thing I want to do is just stick this final stack on top, push down my skewer, make sure I can't see the top of it. What do you guys reckon? Did I overdo it? It's a donut drip cake. It's meant to be overdone. Everything about this screams more crazy, wild, and over the top, which is exactly how I like it. I hope you guys have enjoyed today's pretty cool donut drip cake video. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, make sure you do for 2 new videos every week. And as always, guys, thanks very much for watching.
Happy birthday